to the Plaque Unveiling. Yes, here at 206 East 7th Street for Allen Ginsberg and William S. Burroughs. And this right here is the plaque, which we'll be unveiling at the end of the ceremony. My name is Andrew Berman. I'm the Executive Director of Village Preservation. We're behind the plaque program and a lot of other work in the neighborhood. If you're not familiar with us, we're a nonprofit that's been around since 1980, and we work to preserve, document, and celebrate the special architectural and cultural heritage of Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo, of which the Beat Generation and all of the artists and writers and people associated with it are an incredibly important part of that history and heritage that we work to help preserve and perpetuate. And our plaque program is one of the many ways in which we do that. Before we really get into it, and we're going to have three wonderful speakers who are going to make some great presentations talking a little bit more about the history of the people connected to this building, which also includes Jack Kerouac, who used to come visit Ginsberg and Burroughs here in this building, and was famously photographed here as well. I want to, first of all, thank and acknowledge a few people who played such an incredibly important role in terms of allowing what we're doing here today to take place. First of all, from the building, from 206 East 7th Street, I want to thank Drew Heffron, who I believe is here, Kevin Davey, and the rest of the building's co-op board for their interest in our historic plaque program and their support throughout the process. Anybody who knows our neighborhoods knows there's no difficulty in finding places in our neighborhood where important history took place that's worthy of being honored and remembered. What is difficult to find is property owners who are willing to have a plaque placed on their building to honor that history. So we are especially grateful for those who do, and hopefully we will have many more of those. This is our 21st plaque that we are unveiling today, and those plaques, which there's information about in the handouts that are hopefully have been distributed to everybody. If you haven't gotten one, Maya over there is handing them out. They honor everybody from Jane Jacobs to Jean-Michel Basquiat, James Baldwin to Lorraine Hansberry, Alex Haley, Martha Graham, Frank O'Hara just up the block on 9th Street, Frank Stella, Anais Nin, as well as locations in our neighborhood where really important things happened in connection to politics, social movements, and culture, such as Julius's Bar in the West Village, the San Remo Cafe, and the Fillmore East just over here on 2nd Avenue. So, just to say a couple of quick words about village preservation. As I mentioned, we're a neighborhood nonprofit, and it's really folks like you whose support for our efforts allow us to do everything that we do, whether it's plaque unveilings, about 75 free public programs per year about the history and character of our neighborhoods, our work to preserve small businesses and local cultural institutions, and perhaps most importantly, our fighting for landmark and zoning protections for the neighborhood to prevent demolition of historic buildings like these and to ensure that new development in our neighborhood really contributes to the character of these wonderful, unique communities rather than destroying it. And that means we want to help perpetuate small independent businesses in our neighborhood, new development that's in scale and character with the neighborhood, new development that also helps preserve the socioeconomic mix and diversity of people who call our neighborhoods home. And so that's what we're about, and if you like what we do, please join and support us. And I think the QR code there tells you how you can do that. So a quick couple of words about Allen Ginsberg and William S. Burroughs before we get started, and I'm going to leave it to the speakers to really get into the meat of that. But part of what, of course, makes these two figures so important and which is so characteristic of this neighborhood is they push boundaries. They push boundaries of literature, they push boundaries of culture, they push boundaries of sexuality, they push boundaries in connection to censorship and what was considered legal or acceptable. They changed the culture, they changed the world, and that very much grew out of this community, which was all about cultivating that sense of change on the cultural front, the political front, the social front. And we owe a great debt of gratitude to the people who came before us, who made the world in many ways a better place for all of us to be able to live in, express ourselves, be who we are. And certainly people like Ginsberg and Burroughs played a significant role in contributing to that. So I want to briefly say, so let me briefly mention who the three speakers are before we do the unveiling. First, we're going to hear from culture critic Regina Weinreich, who is the author of Kerouac's Spontaneous Poetics, and one of the earliest full-scale critical studies of Kerouac's literary work. Regina edited and compiled Kerouac's book of haikus. Am I pronouncing that right? Haikus. Book of haikus. Wow. And wrote the introduction to Kerouac's "You're a Genius All the Time," and co-wrote "The Beat Generation" and "American Dream." She's on the faculty of the Department of Humanities and Sciences at the School of Visual Arts, where she teaches courses in beat literature and aesthetics. Then we're going to hear from the two Bobs, and I'll actually give you their full introduction before they come up here to speak. But Regina, I'm going to ask you to come up and share a few words with us. I can hold it for you if that.
Well, let's see. Okay. We have a little, just a little thing. I will be briefly.
Can we just hold it for you?
Yeah, just a minute. Let me grab my things. I just want to say that I'm very, very pleased to be here. When I was asked to come and speak about Alan and William living here, right, eat the mic, that's what they tell me. I thought, wow, they live there? I didn't even know. Am I the only one? But of course, it was the opportunity to learn a few things and to put a few things together. Signed to a 2-year lease on October 2nd, 1952, that's like 70 years ago, Alan was ecstatic about finding the apartment of his dreams at $33.80 a month. The lease is signed to Mr. and Mrs. Allen Ginsberg. And gave Alan the freedom to leave the apartment he shared with Dusty Moreland on West 15th Street. She would have moved in, but Alan asked for rent. He did have girlfriends then, an experiment in heterosexuality. Joyce Johnson said, Alan brought the poet Elise Cowan here. In love with Alan, she typed Kaddish for him and was convinced he still had unresolved issues with his mother. He had 3 rooms on the 3rd floor of the tenement building, apartment 16. As was the case with all of Alan's residences, poets, people came and went. William Burroughs stayed for a few months in the fall. His name was never on the lease. 52-53 were key years for Alan and Phil, before they wrote the work that would make their fame and careers. This was pre-Six Gallery for Alan and post-cataclysmic event that would propel Burroughs to become a writer, to redeem the ugly spirit, as he would later put it in the 1985 introduction to the publication of Queer, about his attempts at seducing a medical student as they traveled through Central and Latin America. The accidental killing of his common-law wife, Joan Vollmer, on September 6, 1951 in Mexico City had to be atoned. Alan had explained that Joan was on a death wish of her own, putting a glass on her head at a cocktail party for Bill to take aim. He fatally missed the mark, and the rest is history. Alan was always there for his friend who, vulnerable, needed his tenderness. Bill at that time was in love with Alan, a situation for which Alan, the younger poet, felt honored. But let's just say he was not in love. This by way of gossip. Barry Miles notes that Alan's tenement window looked out over fire escapes and backyards with laundry lines strung from building to building. Burroughs saw a woman reach out over a fire escape and start pulling the laundry and conceived the futuristic city of Interzone, a great labyrinth of alleyways and passages, squares and tunnels, like a Medina. The imagery of Williams' most infamous novel, Naked Lunch, was being developed, drawing heavily upon Rimbaud's visions of cities in Illuminations. Because Alan was the receiver of Williams' long, intimate letters from Central and Latin America and was now acting as confidant, collaborator, and editor in New York, Burroughs' love for Alan deepened. And Burroughs fell into Alan's social scene, making an important connection to Alan Anson, a poet who had worked with the great British poet W.H. Auden, and would move on to Rome, where Burroughs spent a bit of time hating it before moving on to Tangier, where Naked Lunch was assembled. Needless to say, I never knew either one of them here, and yet I cannot think of them residing in New York City in any other neighborhood. Alan stayed close, wandering a number of apartments. William, after residing in Tangier, Paris, and returning to New York City from London in the 70s, lived at the Bunker, the former YMCA on the Bowery. Even in the 70s, the East Village and this street was, I'm going to say this from a very, very not knowing perspective, sketchy. The kind of place where you could enter at your own peril. That was the mystique, and I cannot tell you firsthand why, because I never had a reason to come. Driving by, you did see a sex worker or two in hot pants. At first acquaintance, when I was a teen, it was at St. Mark's Church, probably for the all-night New Year's Eve readings. Burroughs and Ginsberg were stars. That famous landmark was nearby for them, a stone's throw. Not in this apartment, of course, they had moved on. Not so for me. With a girlfriend much hipper than I was, I took the subway from Brooklyn and met everyone coming and going in the courtyard and garden. This was a time when they moved around a lot. Alan left for Mexico City via Jacksonville and Cuba in December 1953, thereby breaking the lease. But look at these writers' early efforts. The epic Howl, the novel Junkie. Where are they set? Cityscapes, streets, rooftops, alleyways, real or imagined, come from right here. Where did Alan meet those best minds of his generation? Or Bill learn the lingo of users and pushers, the street commerce algebra of need he was writing about all along? I'm going to segue from here to pick up a thread. And the thread is from Elise Cowan's observation that Alan had unresolved issues with his mother. And I'd like to read a little bit from a poem that was written much, much later in the 1980s. Wait, let me see if I have an exact date. Yep, 1983. This is the poem White Shroud, where Alan meets the ghost of his mother. I will read just a part of it. I walked past a niche between buildings with tin canopy shelter from cold rain warmed by hot exhaust from subway gratings, beneath which engines throbbed with pleasant, quiet drone. A shopping bag lady lived in the side alley on a mattress, her wooden bed above the pavement, many blankets and sheets, pots, pans, and plates beside her, fan, electric stove by the wall. She looked desolate, white-haired, but strong enough to cook and stare. Passers-by ignored her building side hovel many years. A few businessmen stopped to speak or give her bread or yogurt. Sometimes she disappeared into state hospital back wards, but now returned to her homely alleyway, sharp-eyed, old, cranky hair, half paralyzed, complaining, angry as I passed. I was horrified a little. Who'd take care of such a woman? Familiar, half neglected on her street, except she'd weathered many snows, stubborn alone in her moth-eaten rabbit fur hat. She had tooth troubles, teeth too old, ground down like horse molars. She opened her mouth to display her gorge. How could she live with that? How eat, I thought. Mushroom-like gray hair, horseshoe incisors she chomped with, hard flat flowers ranged around her gums. Then I recognized she was my mother, Naomi, habiting this old city edge quarter, older than I knew her before her life disappeared. "What are you doing here?" I asked, amazed she recognized me still, astounded to see her sitting up on her own, chin raised to greet me, mocking. "I'm living alone. You all abandoned me. I'm a great woman. I came here by myself. I wanted to live. Now I'm too old to take care of myself. I don't care. What are you doing here?" I was looking for a house, I thought. She has one in poor Bronx. Needs someone to help her shop and cook. Needs her children now. I'm her younger son. Walked past her alleyway by accident, but here she is survived, sleeping at night awake on that wooden platform. Has she an extra room? I noticed her cave adjoined an apartment door unpainted basement storeroom facing her shelter in the building side. I could live here. Worst comes to worst. Best place I'll find, near my mother in our mortal life. My years of haunting continental city streets, apartment dreams, old rooms I used to live in, still paid rent for. Key didn't work, locks changed, immigrant families occupied my familiar hallway lodgings. I'd wandered downhill homeless avenues, money lost, or had come back to the flat, but couldn't recognize my house in London, Paris, Bronx, by Columbia Library, downtown 8th Avenue near Chelsea Subway. Those years unsettled were over now. Here I could live forever. Here have a home with Naomi at long last. At long, long last, my search was ended in this pleasant way. Time to care for her before death. Long way to go yet. Lots of trouble, her cantankerous habits, shameful blankets near the street, tooth pots, dirty pans, half paralyzed, irritable. She needed my middle-aged strength and worldly money knowledge, housekeeping art. I can cook and write books for a living. She'd not have to beg her medicine food, a new set of teeth for company. Don't yell at the world. I can afford a telephone. After 25 years, we could call up Aunt Edie in California. I'll have a place to stay. Best of all, I told Naomi, now don't get mad. You realize your old enemy grandma's still alive. She lives a couple blocks downhill. I just saw her, like you. My breast rejoiced, all my troubles over. She was content, too old to care or yell her grudge, only complaining her bad teeth. What long-sought peace. Then, glad of life, I woke in Boulder before dawn. My second-story bedroom windows, Bluff Street facing east over town rooftops. I returned from the land of the dead to living poesy and wrote this tale of long-lost joy to have seen my mother again. And when the ink ran out of my pen and rosy violet illuminated city treetop skies above the Flatiron Front Range, I went downstairs to the shady living room where Peter Orlovsky sat with long hair lit by television glow to watch the sunrise weather news. I kissed him and filled my pen and wept. I realize it's a long way to here, but I feel like this place and so many places where Alan lived in the East Village occupied his brain and was the perfect setting for this reunion with Mom.
Okay. So thank you very much, Regina. And before we hear from our next speaker, I also just want to thank and acknowledge Juan Rivero from Village Preservation for putting together today's program, along with Leanne G. Bowley, our Director of Programs, who also works very hard on this, and all the other staff members here from Village Preservation, David, Maya, etc., all of whom work incredibly hard to make programs like this one today possible. So our next speaker that we're going to hear from is Bob Rosenthal, who is Allen Ginsberg's memoirist and longtime secretary. Bob is a poet and playwright whose works include Straight Around Allen, On the Business of Being Allen Ginsberg, Cleaning Up New York, the books of poetry, Morning Poems, Lies About the Flesh, Rude Awakenings, Viburnum, and 11 Psalms, and co-written with Bob Holman, who we'll also be hearing from, the plays The Cause of Gravity, The Horror of the Alpines, Bicentennial Suicide, and Clear the Range. Bob, please join us.
I'm going to be showing some pictures, so I want to see the screen. And like Regina was saying, it's in the nature of LES that it leaves you alone to do what you want, to be with whom you want, not to beat you up for being gay, not to beat you up for being interracial or anything. And that was the freedom that Alan always enjoyed in the East Village, and why for so many decades it was his only home, and why he stayed here till his death. So you can put on slide 1. There it is. Okay. The sacred knot of love is about being together in the same locality. This very place is being honored for its misguided yet poignant throes of young love. In October 1952, come on down. The water's fine. So, and also, as Regina pointed out, in 1952, Alan took this lease at 206 East 7th Street, apartment 16, $33.80 a month. Alan was trying to fit, I think we can go to the next slide. Alan was trying to fit into the heterosexual world. He was trying to get along with his girlfriend, Dusty Moreland. Dusty moved her clothes in with Alan. He was working as a copy boy at the World Telegram. Dusty moved out in November. William Burroughs moved in the next August. William had published Junkie with Alan's help. Kerouac had one novel published, and Allen had yet to compose his major poems of this era. The apartment on the third floor in the back was an epicenter for Allen and his writer friends, Jack Kerouac and Gregory Corso. Allen was taking photographs of his friends, and Allen saw the photograph as a means of sacred communication. And even though nobody was famous, they all became famous and become famous in these photographs. But when Allen's taking them with his little brownie camera, he's just loving them on sacred terms. Or as Allen says in his photo book, we loved and saw each other as in a one and only time in eternity, and thus knew each other sacred. Here is an orgy of unfulfilled desire and a deep well of gratification in friendship. Okay. Okay. You didn't get any. So let's go on to the next. We're on the next. Okay. There's William reading from St. Clair's, reading in the apartment. And let's go to the next slide. Good. A painting of Jackson McClough playing a recorder by their friend Iris Brody is on the wall. William is head over heels in love with Allen and wants to make physical love. Allen is not sexually attracted to the older Burroughs and is trying not to be gay. Allen puts William off with an ugly comment on the northeast corner of 7th Street and Avenue B. I don't want your ugly old cock. This hurtful remark filled Allen with regret for decades. He and William did remain sacramental friends until their deaths, 44 years later. Slide, there we go. Allen liked to go onto the fire escape and shoot back into the apartment. There's William, another slide. And there's Jack. Jack visited on weekends. And slide. These next shots show Jack and Bill robo-playing. No, back up one more. There we go. And Allen's caption becomes, "But Jack, I told you over and over, if you continue your present pattern of living with my mare, you will be wound closer and closer to her apron strings till you're an old man." So they're doing a scene. And then next one, this is a knife fighting scene, which doesn't have a caption. Like all concordance of time and place, the moment does not last long. William leaves for Tangiers, and then Allen leaves East 7th Street for Mexico, and then San Francisco. William will write Naked Lunch. Allen will accept his homosexuality and meet Peter Orlovsky, compose Howl, Sunflower Sutra, Supermarket in California. But because of Allen's brownie camera, these moments live on in our culture, sweet, almost innocent, ecstatic, in love. Now the next. This is a piece of one of Allen's really most famous photographs, and it's captioned, "Jack Kerouac, Southern Pacific Railroad Brakeman's Rule Book in his pocket, couch pillows airing on fire escape, 3 flights up, overlooking backyard clotheslines south. He's out for a smoke." Jack had already published The Town and the City, completed a treasury of a dozen unprinted classic book manuscripts from On the Road, Visions of Cody, Dr. Sachs, through early books of blues and dreams, begun Some of the Dharma, and Long Adventures of the Subterraneans with Aileen Lee, Mardu Fox, who typed for William Burroughs, then in residence editing Yahé letters and queer typescripts. Gregory Corso visited that season. I wrote The Green Automobile in my apartment, 206 East 7th Street, near Tompkins Square Park, Manhattan, probably September 1953. Heroes are mythological and beyond time and place, yet this iconic portrait of Jack Kerouac by Allen Ginsberg defines a time in history and a cultural stance for generations to come. It started here, up 3 flights, in the back. To the next. And this sweet picture of Allen smiling. Ginsberg would not allow this one published in his lifetime. He disliked his vulnerability here. But looking back in time, it's plain that there's a beautiful world ahead for him. And we are lucky that he survived his bohemian days in the East Village.
Thank you so much for that, and those pictures are incredibly telling and compelling. I'll also just quickly mention, by the way, on our website we have this wonderful historic image archive where we're actually blessed to have some other really wonderful images of Allen Ginsberg and several of the other beat poets in there, so please check that out if you haven't already. And then our final speaker is a great friend of Village Preservation, a great friend of poetry, the East Village, downtown, Bob Holman. Bob's been making poetry downtown for over 25 years, and he's perhaps best known locally as the impresario of the Bowery Poetry Club, founded in 2001 and morphed into Bowery Arts and Science last year. He's the author of 16 works of poetry, and it's my very great honor to introduce him.
Thank you, Lee. Well, we got some treats for you here today. The plaque still awaits, but my old cohort here and partner in crime, we've worked a lot in the theater, so we thought we'd give you a little piece of theater today. Words spoken by Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs about this building behind us. We're both holding this beautiful book, Don't Hide the Madness. Who did that cover?
Robert Crumb.
Robert Crumb cover. How about that from our own Three Rooms Press here? Run out and get your copy soon. The discussion between these two guys is great. And now you're going to actually get to see the other generation giving it straight to you. Alan, why don't you start with your first line?
Bill, how long were you on East 7th Street with me in New York, in my apartment?
Oh, about a couple of months, 2, 3.
I think it was the fall because you left around Christmas.
I left around Christmas and went to Rome.
Yeah.
And then I didn't come back.
Yeah, let's see. They're saying any stories when they stayed.
Stories? What do you mean stories?
About the apartment.
Well,
what I remember is, among other things, besides the fact that we put together the Yahé letters
right,
and the queer manuscript,
yeah,
and that Aileen was there.
Who?
That Aileen was there.
Oh.
Aileen Lee typing.
Yes, yes, yes.
Kerouac stole a push cart. Kerouac and Gregory stole a push cart and left it at the front of the apartment. You remember that?
No, I don't.
And I got really mad.
Well, I would too, I think.
And we had some grass in the apartment.
That's it. You know, you can get people into all sorts of trouble. To steal something that people need is not funny at all. I know some people in Paris who thought it was smart to steal a policeman's cape, and boy, the gendarmes were really pissed off and right. This costs money, man. They don't get paid very much. There's nothing funny about that sort of thing. I think it's bad because it's not a prank.
Well, that's what I thought, but also it would bring in the heat to the apartment.
Well, that's it.
And there's grass around.
Exactly.
So I got upset. Of course, it never did bring the heat, but
Well, that cape certainly brought the heat over in Paris.
one thing I remember actually, at some point or other, you and Lucian and Kerouac got me on the couch and took down my pants.
I don't remember that.
Because it was thrilling. I got a hard-on. I remember. I was ashamed because Lucian was there.
Well, it should be.
On the couch in front of the window.
Well, yes, I know where the couch was. Typical railroad apartment where they usually had the bathtubs in the kitchen.
Yeah, I had one there.
Typical slum.
Actually, I ran into a girl who's living there now, who keeps inviting me to come back and see it.
Well, that'd be interesting.
A friend of the rock group Sonic Youth that plays with you.
Who?
Sonic Youth, a rock group.
Oh, yeah.
She's one of the singer's friends.
That's right.
And she's now living in my old apartment. But one thing I remember very clearly is the origin of the market, or interzone and market.
Yes, from Naked Lunch, yes.
Fantasy with you, and looking out the window, and you saw a neighbor lady lean out with a very intense expression and pull in the laundry on the laundry line. You remember that?
No, but I know about those laundry lines.
And you saw the laundry lines, and then all the fire escapes from that rose a routine about balconies crisscrossing in the void.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the lines of ropes connecting buildings.
Exactly.
I remember you looked out of the window and you were impressed by the expression of the woman's face, because I could look up a minute. She leaned out like that, only, with a great intensity of expression, extending her body out, pulling with her hand out, grasping,
I remember.
and you were imitating her
Avaricious.
Thank you, Bill. Avaricious gesture.
I know my vocabulary.
Yes. Sometimes I get tangled up. Grasping and pulling the laundry line, and from that was the seed of the market.
Yes.
And do you have any visual memory of that outside the window at all? The laundry lines?
No, but I know I can see the laundry lines are a feature of these apartments. And the laundry's on the balcony. You find that, the balcony, and sort of the slums all over the world.
Yeah, Naples.
Naples, I was thinking of that. Naples and Marseille and all kinds of places. And actually that's...
Actually, Bill, that photograph of Kerouac that I have,
Yeah.
you can actually see the laundry line, those specific laundry lines. Did you ever notice that in the photo?
I think I did. Yes, I did, as a matter of fact.
It takes a very good printer to get them because it was very faint. So let's see, that's where you first met Gregory there.
I first met Gregory right here, yes.
I think that day he came around with a little attaché case full of liqueurs,
Yes, little bottles, those little bottles of liqueur.
wanting to sell them. He was living by his wit.
Yes, he was indeed. He wanted to sell those, and he burned the toast.
That I don't remember. What happened?
Nothing. He was making some toast. You asked him to make some toast, and the toast was burnt to a crisp. And I complained. And he said, well, he got real annoyed. He said, well, he was a poet. He wasn't expected to be able to make toast properly, which he didn't. He burned the toast.
Well done.
Thank you, Bob. I want to read a little bit of a poem before we hang out. This is the poem that Alan talks about, that he wrote here in this very spot. Okay, it's called "The Green Automobile," and it's lovely. You can hear him on YouTube. When he read it, he turned on the radio, and you listen to some bebop. We won't have that, but then I'm not going to read the whole poem. But this is a taste of Allen Ginsberg, 1953, here at 206 East 7th Street, soon to be plaqued. The green automobile. If I had a green automobile, I'd go find my old companion in his house on the Western Ocean. Ha, 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 ha. I'd honk my horn at his manly gait. Inside, his wife and 3 children sprawl naked on the living room floor. He'd come running out to my car full of heroic beer and jump screaming at the wheel, for he's the greater driver. We'd pilgrimage to the highest mount of our earlier Rocky Mountain visions, laughing in each other's arms. Delight surpassing the highest Rockies, and after old agony, drunk with new years, bounding toward the snowy horizon, blasting the dashboard with original bop hot rod on the mountain. We'd better up the cloudy highway, where angels of anxiety careen through the trees and scream out of the engines. Oh, the symphony of the streets likes to call back to me. How many Saturday nights will be made drunken by this legend? How will young Denver come to mourn her forgotten sexual angel? How many boys will strike the black piano in imitation of the excess of a native saint? Or girls fall wanton under his specter in the high schools of melancholy night? While all the time in eternity, in the wan light of this poem's radio, we'd sit behind the forgotten shades, hearkening the lost jazz of all Saturdays. Kneel, we'll be real heroes now, in a war between our cocks and time. Let's be the angel of the world's desire, and take the world to bed with us before we die. Sleeping alone or with companion, girl or fairy, sheep or dream, I'll fall of lack, love you satiety. All men fall, our fathers fell before, but resurrecting that lost flesh is but a moment's work of mind, an ageless monument to love in the imagination, memorial built of our own bodies. So this green automobile I give you in flight, a present from my imagination. We'll go riding over the Rockies. We'll go on riding all night long until dawn. Then back to your railroad, your house and your children, and broken leg destiny. You'll ride down the plains in the morning and back to my visions, my office, eastern apartment. I'll return to New York. Allen Ginsberg, Green Automobile. Thank you.
Bob, don't go far, because now we are going to do the unveiling. And I'm going to ask Bob and Regina and folks from the building to join me up here. Regina, if you're able.
Yeah.
I'd love to have you up here for the actual physical unveiling. Just come right up here, and once it's unveiled, we hope it will be here forever, and it will enable this incredibly rich history to be tangibly remembered, so that folks walking down the street know that these incredibly important figures who had such a wonderful impact on our culture and our neighborhood are able did what they did here. Yep, I'm gonna come over to this side. So everybody just grab a little piece of this. I think it's gonna take a couple of tugs to get this off. There we go. And I'm gonna read it so that everybody can see. Allen Ginsberg, 1926 to 1997. William S. Burroughs, 1914 to 1997. The two writers lived here from 1952 to 1953 at the beginning of their careers. Hosting literary compatriot Jack Kerouac, whom Ginsberg famously photographed on the building's fire escape. Together, they helped form the nucleus of the Beat Generation, an influential post-war countercultural movement that promoted existential reflection, lifestyle experimentation, and the rejection of material values placed by village preservation. So here it is, and hopefully it will be here forevermore to honor this incredibly wonderful history. I want to say thank you again so much to all of our wonderful speakers for enriching today's unveiling, to our friends from 206 East 7th Street for being such wonderful partners in terms of this, all of you for turning out tonight, and everybody who supports and participates in the work that we do, which makes programs and plaque unveilings like this possible. So thank you again so much, and we hope to see you again soon at the next program, the next unveiling, the next demonstration, whatever it is. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.